he was a tyrant. He was not the nicest guy to work with or talk to. I called him and he just wouldn't hardly talk to me. And he said, "Send me the tapes. I'll take a look at them." I said, "Okay." So I sent him both King of the Spring and the Sound of Spring because they came out in parallel at the same time. And he got them. He called me back and he goes, "I don't want them. These are horrible." And he hung up on me.
Welcome to the Winchester Life Podcast. Through insider access to industry pioneers, firsthand looks at cutting-edge tech advancements, and the stories behind the scenes that have shaped the world of shooting sports and hunting as we know it, we'll dive into the sacred places like deer camps and duck blinds, talk about innovation and shooting tips with the world's best, while revisiting age-old traditions of hunting and shooting still alive in our country. I'm your host, Jason Brown, and welcome to the show. The Winchester Life Podcast is brought to you by Winchester Ammunition, Winchester Repeating Arms, Winchester Safes, White Flyer Targets, Folds of Honor, Birchwood Casey, Walkers, Winchester Pet, and Winchester Optics. It's 1989, and the outdoor industry was on the precipice of exploding. A turf war of sorts was being waged between camouflage companies, and record numbers of VHS hunting tapes were being distributed across the country to a rapidly growing contingent of hunters. In the middle of it all was a young Mark Drury, still in college and winning turkey calling contests at the state and national level at a rapid rate. In a stroke of luck that would forever change his life, through a crowded show floor, young entrepreneur Toxey Haas sought out a conversation with Mark just minutes after winning another turkey calling competition. A lifelong friendship was forged, and the rest is history. Since that day, 35 years have passed, and the loyalty to Mossy Oak has never wavered. Early mentors like Will Primos and Cuz Strickland would help light the fire for Mark and his brother Terry as they entered the world of video production, where they have since released well over 125 titles that now reside in their library. Now one of the most accomplished and knowledgeable whitetail deer hunters in America, Mark began to build that legacy in 1998 when he closed the deal on the largest free-range buck ever taken on film at the time. In 2019, Drury Outdoors was inducted into the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, further cementing their place as innovators in outdoor media, as producers and personalities. Mark's determination to build a business and career in the outdoor space, paired with an unrivaled work ethic, has led his company to the forefront of the multi-billion-dollar industry he helped build. Welcome to the Winchester Life Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Brown. All right, Mr. Drury, welcome to the Winchester Life Podcast. How's things going down there?
It's going good, man. We just got back from Texas. Prior to that, we were in Kansas. Now we're back in Iowa. Second gun season opens in a few days, and then late muzzleloader season. So sleeping in my own bed again and hunting deer that I hopefully know what they're going to do, or at least I think I do.
Yeah, I mean, you know how things go. Things are dictated by whitetails and whitetail movement, and we had this set up a little earlier today, but man, a giant showed up, and you just had to move some stuff.
We just erected a brand new box blind, a hawk, up in a spot that I've thought about for years, but the pictures I've been getting of him, and really it's kind of interesting, like the cameras I'm getting him on are ones that typically are better during the rut when they're moving in this transitional draw. And he's been using it just about every day, and I really wasn't set well for him. So we went in, moved the box blind in. I mowed some paths for shooting lanes through the grass because this whole farm is just 6 to 7 foot tall warm season grass, which is why he's in there, I think. And then it leads into this giant bottom that's a bean field and a cornfield. So I feel pretty good. The access is really, really good. You know, it's almost should be legal how good the access is. There's this huge pasture, like 1,000-acre pasture, You drive all the way back through this pasture, climb a fence, walk 60, 70 yards, and you're in this monstrous bedroom full of grass and brushy draws and stuff. It's really a cool spot.
That's awesome. So you guys have a crew coming down there in a couple days?
Yeah, we got some guy. One guy coming in has a tag. So
awesome, man. Well, I kind of wanted to. It's been a long time that I've wanted to talk to you about some of this stuff, and we've known each other for a long time, and been part of the industry. But growing up, I want to walk this all the way back. Growing up in Missouri, talk about your upbringing. Was hunting a part of what you guys did as a family?
My dad and I never did hunt together. But Terry was a hunter, and Terry's 10 years older than I am. But Terry was gone. He was in college. By the time I was 8, he's 18. He's out. He had Kimberly, his first daughter, when he was 18. So
yeah, I
grew up kind of alone. I'm the youngest of 5, but there was a big gap between myself and my next oldest sister. So Mom and Dad were empty nesters with the exception of me, and we lived in a very rural community. And everyone there hunted. So while my family was not very active within hunting, the community was. It's just what you did. Everybody hunted. And we backed up to a giant hardwood block between where I grew up and the Mississippi River. It's like 2.5, 3 miles. And that entire span is all hardwoods. It's just rolling hardwoods all the way to the Mississippi. And we backed up to that. I remember as a kid, I could hear turkeys from my bedroom window gobbling in the morning. We'd see deer out in the field, We backed up to a really raw, big natural area. And Dad, even though he didn't hunt, he was part of a club called the 40 Acre Club. He bought into it. And he hunted a little when he was younger, but not a lot by the time I was coming up. And he bought into this 40 Acre Club. Well, the 40 Acre Club all total was 640 acres. So I had a lot of dirt to roam on behind the house there. And, Mom was really the more outdoorsy one. And she was a stay-at-home mother. Dad was an absolute workaholic, big construction boss. And Mom taught me how to, clean my first squirrel, taught me how to clean my first rabbit, showed me what a box trap was. So I just grew up with that, with her influence. And then really my uncles Leroy and Marvin, believe it or not, one on my mom's side, one on my dad's side, they were big turkey hunters in our town. And I went to a Catholic school, Bloomsdale Elementary, St. Agnes. I went to St. Agnes, and I remember when I was a little kid, Marvin and Leroy, when they'd kill a turkey, they would bring it to the school to show all the students.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking that was so cool. Those are my uncles bringing those turkeys in here. And even when I was a little kid, in 6th grade, we had this assignment to write about something, and I wrote about the wild turkey. So I've been fascinated with wild turkey since I was a little bitty kid. Then I started learning how to call them. Uncle Leroy gave me my first call and took me out to listen to my first gobbles. And I got way into turkeys way early in life. I couldn't wait to learn how to call and do better. And that's really what led me into turkey calling, and turkey hunting, which is my first true love.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, a lot of people now, they think of you as Mark, the white-tailed deer guy, that goes and kills giant deer. And I personally remember you as the turkey guy, growing up and you got Walter Parrott, you got Ricky Joe Bishop, you got Eddie Salter, you got all these Chris Parrish, these legends of turkey calling. And I really that's kind of how I got interested in turkey hunting, because in Michigan we didn't have wild turkeys growing up, until I was in high school, and that was right around when they had the first season that was open for the general public. But there's really no way for us up in Michigan to learn about turkey hunting, so I dove deep, and you're reading about all these guys. And so 1989 rolls around, and you're at a show and you meet up with Toxey Haas. And you meet up, Mossy Oak was the young kid on the block at the time. They're 3 years into, what was Mossy Oak and the camouflage boom, really, that was started by, Jim Crumley and Tree Bark, and then Mossy, and then real. So a lot of things are happening. Talk about that relationship that you guys had, that you and Toxy and Mossy Oak. I mean, that's really the beginning for you, right? When it came to kind of getting your start.
No question. I had been calling competitively since like 83 or 84, and I was doing that more on a local basis around St. Genevieve County and other contests throughout Missouri. And I think somewhere in there, I think 1987, I traveled to Natchez, Mississippi, because I had the ability to call with my voice, and I did it a lot, and people were like, you need to go to the World Voice Calling Championship. So I traveled to Natchez, Mississippi, and I already knew Cuz because of other calling contests that I'd called at where he was a judge, and I met him, and he was very nice to me. And it was in Natchez, which is his hometown, that I called in the voice calling competition, and I came in third, if I'm not mistaken, the first time I called in it, and that was 87. I also won the Tennessee Open that year. I won the Missouri State Championship that year. So I started to maybe get a little bit of a name for myself in calling, and I started to become very competitive in some of these different competitions. I went to the Grand Nationals in 87. Then in 88, I went back to Natchez, and I'm in college now. I call in the competition again, and I think I was second. And I'm friendly with Cuz. I went to Mississippi State, if I'm not mistaken, and called in that competition. But then it was in 1989 that I went to Natchez, and I had my stuff together, and I was calling better than I've ever called with my voice. And I called. I won the World Voice Calling Championship, and I dethroned Preston Pittman, who had won it the previous 2 years. And post-contest, Bobby Cleveland from the Clarion Ledger asked me to come do an interview. So I'm sitting there talking to Bobby, and this guy walks over, and Cuz wasn't even really with Mossy Oak yet, right? He was just starting to have that relationship. But he was with them at this point, and I don't know what Toxy looks like. And I was sitting there, and he comes over and he interrupts Bobby, and he goes, hey, what camouflage do you wear? I'm just curious. And I go, well, actually, I just ordered a set of Mossy Oak off the back of Turkey Call magazine. I think it's the best looking thing I've ever seen. And it was when they were just first really getting momentum because they were brand new. And he goes, I'm Toxey Haas, the inventor. I'd like to talk to you when you're done with this gentleman and visit with you. And I said, oh, man, that's awesome. And a good buddy of mine, Joe Sexar, is the one that brought to my attention the Mossy Oak on the back of this, this book. And I looked at it and I was like, man, that stuff's awesome. And Dempsey White and Boyd White, who are from Natchez, they were wearing it. And I started asking them how it did in the woods. And they were like, man, this stuff's incredible. They asked me to come down and turkey hunt. Well, I had already ordered the camouflage. So Toxy pulls me aside, and Cuz is standing there with him. And I'd won the world championship with voice calling. I also won the Open that day. I won both. And Toxy's like, man, I'd like to get you on our team, And I said, great, I'd like to do that too. I said, I'm still in college. I said, I'd really like to get in the industry. I said, I'd like to work for you. That was in the first 5 minutes of talking to him. And he goes, why don't you come down and you could stay with me and Diane. And I said, well, my spring break is coming up. I'd like to do that. I said, I'll be down there in a couple weeks, early March. He goes, all right, great. You can stay with me and Diane. I said, I will work for free. I just want to learn more about the industry. I said, put me to work when I get there. He said, absolutely. So I traveled down, stayed with Toxy and Diane, and I worked in the factory. I packed boxes. I stuffed envelopes. I got to meet all the girls in the office. I got to meet all the people in shipping, all the people that were in management there at the company, and just absolutely hit it off with everyone.
Yeah.
It was just an amazing stroke of luck to meet Toxy, and then to have just ordered Mossy Oak the previous week.
Yeah.
Was just, he changed my life that day, right? I mean, Toxey Haas changed my life, Terry's life, Matt's, Taylor's, and a turkey call led to that. But 1989 was a big year for us. We started Drury Outdoors that year. I met Toxey Haas that year. Tracy and I got married that year. So it was a really big year for us. 89 was. This is our 35th anniversary for Drury Outdoors. But man, Toxey has treated us so well through the years, and my relationship with Cuz and Preston Pittman all led to that moment. So those turkey calls were very important to me back in the day.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about those days. It's just nostalgic, and there's so much energy in the industry. It was so new. Everything was new. It seemed like a new product was popping up, every week. Lock-on tree stands were just starting to become a thing. Archery manufacturers were coming up with new products, technology. It was crazy, and it's hard to explain to my kids, my boys, and I teach a production class at a college, and they ask me a lot, like, what was it like back then? And I'm like, am I that old? Yeah, I guess I am that old. In the early 90s, the late 80s, the amount of energy and optimism in the outdoor industry it's hard to even explain what that was like. Can you remember what it was like back then when the industry was starting to get mature? It was maturing. It was really just starting. What was it like going to those shows, and how's it different back then than it is now?
Well, I remember a lot of it because Toxey put me to work. I went and spent that week with him, and then, it was that summer, and he actually contacted me through Cecil Carter, and they had an opening coming up to be a rep. So they hired me to cover Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas. Mossy Oak wasn't there yet. They tasked me with getting it in Bass Pro and Cabela's. I'm still in college, okay? And I told them that. I want to do this, but I'm still going to college. They said, that's okay. Just get on the road when you can. Do it over spring break. Do it over summer. Go out and meet these customers. When you graduate, the job's here. So what a blessing. But also what a lesson I learned going in green. I'll never forget the first time I went into Bass Pro Shops. Randy Spatharos was the clothing buyer. And I went in there and I literally just made every mistake in the book. I couldn't have done a worse presentation for Randy. And I just knew I was not going to get Mossy Oak in there that day. And I was kind of my wounds. I left the buying shop. And I went over into the archery side. This was when they only had one store, right? Yep. The main store there in Springfield on Campbell. I go into the archery side of the store, and there's a gentleman behind the counter by the name of Darren Hogan. And we started talking about bows. And we hit it off. He asked me to go out to dinner. I did. I met his brother, Brad Hogan, who was a turkey caller. We hit it off. And Darren and I remain close friends to this day. But interesting to meet Darren at the first time that I was calling on Bass Pro, and now look where he's at. He's the head buyer for hunting there at Bass Pro. So those relationships go deep. But to your point, yes, everything was energized. And the thing I remember the most about Mossy Oak and about those early days was that battle between them and Realtree for space on the shelf, for viewership when it comes to videos and TV. There were a lot of people getting into the videos at that time. TNN was not far around the corner for the outdoor block. There was such a battle between Mossy Oak and Realtree, and I really felt the marketing that they did to get ahead of the other really grew the entire industry, in my opinion. Those two were such staunch competitors, and they were trying to get their patterns on as many producers and as many different people as they could. Writers, the outdoor press was huge back then. It was one of the main avenues that everybody used to get their word out. And I really felt like that was the part of the fuel that got the outdoor industry really, really rolling, because they were supporting all of these different video producers, outdoor writers, and television shows. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a couple phases to the growth in the industry. I think phase one was the camouflage companies. That momentum that was in the industry, it was definitely pushed, and it was a catalyst of the camouflage companies. But I think the next step was the outdoor channel, and the actual television side is what kind of pushed it to the next level. But backing up to the VHS days, so
that was a very nostalgic time. It was a big time in the outdoor space because there wasn't a channel back then. There wasn't internet. The way I consumed anything that I knew was on a VHS tape. And this was before DVDs, late 80s. Now, you guys around that time, first M.A.D calls, I want to talk about that.
M.A.D occurred in 94, but 89 through 94, to your point, we were doing VHS tapes and selling them to all the rental stores across the country.
Yeah, so you make a point, rental stores, and a lot of people that are listening to this might not even remember like the rental side of the game. You would sell it to a party store, we call them party stores, or bait and tackle shop, or a rental store. You would rent that tape out. And if it was out, you go to the store, well, I can't watch, I can't watch King of the Spring right now because, John down the road rented it out yesterday and he hadn't brought it back yet. That was the reality of how you'd consume content in the late 80s and early 90s. Talk about that process, like you guys the first time saying, let's document these hunts. Let's grab this big SVHS camera. Let's put them together. Like, what was that process like the first time?
Again, it went back to the turkey calling. Like I rented every single possible turkey tape I could find, and back then there weren't many. Denny Gulvis had the ones that were most, hunting spring gobblers. They were the most popular tapes out back then. But Denny didn't kill them, and then Wilbur came out with the Truth One, and they were killing them on there. And I went to Terry and I said, "We can call these birds in." I said, "I'll get them in." And I said, I knew every top caller in the country. I said, "Let's gather the best talent in terms of callers and get them on our tape and then kill every turkey that comes in." I used Denny's as an example. And I said, "I don't have enough money to buy a camera. Do you want to go partner?" So we did. We each put in $1,250. We bought an SVHS camera, an AG450, a Panasonic AG450.
Yep.
And that recommendation from Cuz. We bought that camera and we started going around and hunting, mostly in Missouri, but we also went to Arkansas. We went to Oklahoma, and we started putting videos together, or hunts together, and we produced our first tape, King of the Spring. And back then, you had to get on that rental shelf, but there was a Sheen Ray, who owned Telemark, and then eventually KB Marketing, had a corner on the industry. And there were just a few producers. And I talked to Cuz and I said, "How do I get this tape, into distribution?" He said, "You need to talk to Sheen Ray." He said, "If you get in with him, you're rolling, and if you don't, it's going to be a tough road." So I got Sheen's contact information. I called him, and Sheen was he was a tyrant. He was not the nicest guy to work with or talk to. I called him, and he just wouldn't hardly talk to me. And he said, "Send me the tapes. I'll take a look at them." I said, "Okay." So I sent him both King of the Spring and the Sound of Spring because they came out in parallel at the same time.
Yeah.
And he got them. He called me back, and he goes, "I don't want them. These are horrible." And he hung up on me like that.
Yeah.
So I called him back, and I said, "Mr. Ray, I think you just hung up on me." And I said, "How am I going to get better?" I said, "You told me you didn't like them, but you didn't tell me what you didn't like." I said, "How am I going to get better if you don't let me know what you didn't like? I want to produce a tape that you can sell for us." He goes, "You said the magic words. How soon can you be in Oklahoma City? I'll teach you." Another life-changing myself and Terry. And I said, "I'll be there when you want me to." And he told me to come down, the next week. So I drove all the way to Oklahoma City, and Terry and I both went. And he bought both of those titles from us before we left. He said, "I'm going to buy these two to get you started, but you got to get better on your next ones, and here's what you need to do." And we left Oklahoma City with $50,000 in cash.
Crazy.
That's what he paid us. He said, "I'll pay you cash, $25,000 each." We were like, "Okay." That was more than we thought we'd ever make.
That's
right?
unreal. That's crazy. That's how, I know that's how it happened back then, but that's the revenue you made. There was no more after that. Right? It's just like they get it.
He got it, and then he there's no telling how many copies of King of Spring and Sound of Spring. We didn't know, but we took the cash, bought more equipment, and just tried to, use that monies to be better and do better in the way that he told us we needed to be. So we did 6 turkey titles across 3 years before we ever did our first whitetail title.
Yep.
And that whitetail title was called Monster Bucks. And then we did Monster Bucks 2 and Monster Bucks 3. And then each year in the spring, we do a turkey, and in the fall, we do a deer or 2. And started rolling down the road, and Sheen would buy every one. And he was selling them through a telemarketing agency. Well, all of his telemarketers were in the state penitentiary there in Oklahoma. So when we brought out the tape, I would fly to Oklahoma City. I'd go to the state pen, and I would tell them all about the tape and educate them on how we produced it and what was in it. And then they were the ones calling all the different rental stores all across the country.
That's unreal. I never realized. That's crazy. I never realized that aspect of the distribution side, and obviously the state pen is another wrinkle to it. But yeah, I mean, I love this era of the outdoor industry because it was so new, and all these little things are what kind of moved everybody forward. And when I think about the way you guys have changed the game over the years, is it's persistence, and obviously that's part of the story. It's very prevalent, just already, but it's you guys taking chances in looking at the industry and how can we do things differently. And the way I see that is whether it's graphics that you guys put an emphasis on for the covers of your tapes or your DVDs, whether it's graphics and animations within your stories, within your content. You guys have always seemed to kind of push the envelope a little bit there, and I think that's just you guys wanting to move the needle. And moving forward, I think it's the same approach you guys had with Deercast. It was the same thing. What's the next thing that we can do? Talk a little bit, and you and I have talked about Deercast and just what that was and the lift that it was, but talk a little bit about that, how it started, and the timeline for that.
Yeah, certainly. Well, we brought out Deercast probably in, I think, 18. Terry and I were testing it in 16 and 17. And really what led into that was the trail cameras. And when we started using our trail cameras, probably in 06, 07, they were, well, actually I had some trail cameras back in like 2001, 2002, but they were film cameras. And you'd get, you'd take 36 pictures, you'd have to go check the camera, take them into Walmart, get them developed, and then you could see what was on the cameras. But once we got the ones where you could actually get a lot of pictures onto a compact flash card and then come back and look at them, we started to see patterns through time of certain days where everything would daylight, and then you'd go 4 or 5 days in a row where nothing would daylight. And I'm making a long story short here, but we were like, what's going on these days? And we started to put 2 and 2 together and really do a deep dive into weather history and check out what happened and what different variables did what on those days. And through time, across probably a decade, we really started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and we were like, if we could create an algorithm that would predict this through an app, we could really help people kind of understand when deer will move, while they'll move. We were already producing the show 13 for Outdoor Channel, where we talk about the 13 different phases and how deer change from September when the season opens till January. There are some light switch events in there. Mm-hmm. And then how does the weather affect them in each of those different phases? And we finally put it all together in an algorithm with a fantastic developer there in St. Louis. He was literally right down the street from our studio. I'm just lucky in that. And the key thing about the gentleman that helped us develop this, he was a pilot. So he understood weather terminology to the degree that hunters understand weather terminology. So we could say what the deer were doing in response to a certain condition, and he knew how to put that into a graph and into an algorithm, and that's where the algorithm was born. We tested it out for probably a couple falls and then released it to the public, and we just continue to tweak it to this day. And we're just so proud of the work that's been put into Deercast, and now the mapping has gone to the next level. It's really a very advanced app right now. It's been a labor of love, but it's one we're very proud of.
What was the biggest hurdle you guys had in the development of that?
Our lack of knowledge of the development world. we were really green. I mean, beyond green. And we learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes early on when we developed and then released Deercast. We should have. We went with a website based company and tried to turn it into an app, as opposed to taking what we had built through our website and going to an app developer. And they speak two different languages.
Yeah.
And that was our biggest mistake. But we've ended up rebuilding the whole thing. And the consumer doesn't know any of this. They don't see it. They just see the app. But on the back end, we were spending lots and lots of cash because we made some mistakes early on, man. We burned through some cash trying to get that thing to work, to the point we wanted it. Because Terry and I and Matt were all very much perfectionists, and we just were not satisfied. If something was a little bit off, we wanted to make sure we'd fix it. Well, as new phones get developed, as technology advances, you constantly have to upgrade these apps or they get left behind. So it's a very, very costly business to be in, but everything's good now. The app performs very, very well, and we don't have nearly the backside problems we did in the front end. But did we make some mistakes early on?
So speaking of technology, I mean, when you think back to the last, 35 years, in your opinion, what is the single most, and I'm sure there are a lot, what is the single most piece of technology, whether it's a tool, whether it's a piece of technology that you think has been either invented or manufactured in the hunting industry that has helped hunters become more successful?
I'm fairly confident in this answer, and that's trail cameras. Part A. Part B is cell trail cameras, right? Like, it took a lot of the mystery out of going out and sky. When we first got on deer, we were looking at tracks. We hunted everything based on the size of the track, and that's how we'd identify mature deer. And then, of course, you had to sit there and wait for one to walk by and go, "Oh, that's the deer that made that big track."
Yeah.
We think, transfer or fast forward to 2007 through 10, 11, trail cameras were exploding, and more specifically, the last 5-6 years, cell cams are everywhere. So it takes a little bit of the mystery out of it, and I think at times, I see pros and cons to cellular trail cams. I think at times it takes some of the scouting out of it that you really should have that knowledge and should be able to do, and it makes not so serious hunters probably better than they would be without trail cams.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
For sure.
That's a con. The pros, oh my goodness, that's the deer I'm hunting and it's him and only him. I'm passing everything else, So it will, at the same time, it can be a bit of a negative. It has a lot of pros. Gets a lot of people interested in it more on a year-round basis.
Yeah.
I see it with younger kids. They want to see those reports. They want to see what the deer are doing, and they can learn about age class and when they move and why they're daylighting. So it can be a tremendous teaching tool as well. But, you can see it make some people a little better than they would be, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's times, how many times have you been on stand and you have cameras that you can see or in areas that you can see, and you're not getting pictures of the big deer. Yeah, I mean, for one reason or another, they're just behind it or they're just in front of it. And you've hunted a spot for a couple days, and it's just because that deer is not on this camera doesn't mean he's not here. He could be here. So, I see a lot of guys not going out and hunting if that deer isn't on camera, if it's not hitting that scrape. So, there are things, and there's something to that old school. I remember I had this. It was called I think it was the trail timer, and it was a little box. Do you remember those? And it had like a little rope, like a small string, and you'd put it across the trail, and it would trip it, and then you'd go back to the trail timer, and you'd put this little, it looked almost like a zip tie. You'd push in, and it would tell you when it was pulled out. And it's like, what do you even gain by that? It's just it could have been a raccoon walk by. The early days.
Yeah, but early days of technology, and people thought that was cool, but it didn't last long.
It didn't last long. I remember the very first camera. It was a 35 millimeter camera I had, and I put it on this scrape. And I'm like, God, I'm going to get so many great pictures of this buck. I know he's here. and it was I think it was an old stealth camera, maybe the first model they made. It was early mid 2000s, maybe earlier than that. Put it on a tree and locked that sucker on there, and came back 2 days later. The roll was done. It was a 36 roll, and I took it in, and I got 1 hour photos. I got doubles on the prints. I spent like $20 because I knew there was going to be this giant. Get all the prints back, and it's nothing but leaves and branches and grass blowing, and I'm like, oh man, I definitely screwed that up. But the technology has come so far now, and for years it's just really been part of our stories. We get to use that content, that footage, the videos, and we use them in our stories. And a deer we just finally closed the chapter on, Rip, a couple last week. We've got so much story about him through cameras, cell cams, but we only laid real good solid footage of him one time before that. So it helps tell that story. And I know you guys obviously use the same method for your storytelling.
I enjoy looking at trail pictures because you're seeing them in their world. And, I always say it's one thing to put a camera out and take a picture of a shooter. It's another thing to go in there and actually have the wind right, the access right, make the shot, and not goof everything up. I mean, so I do think they help you a great deal from that standpoint, but you still have to skill set to go out there and kill the deer. And sometimes that's challenging.
Yeah. So speaking of deer, if there's one story, one buck, and there's probably your great bucks are probably like kids, you can't choose them. But what is the one story that you kind of say that is my favorite buck that I ever had a chance to put a tag on?
No, that'd be Bucktober for sure. That was a deer that was 2015, and he ended up grossing like 211, and he had 6-7 inches broke off, but he was 27 inches wide. So there's this just giant buck that I knew was the largest buck I'd ever had on camera, and the hunt for him was just unbelievable. I actually killed him the year before by taking a camera and putting a trail camera, not a cell cam, just a trail cam. I slowed it way down so it would last the whole season, and I was trying to scout him the year before in a couple different draws on this farm where I thought he was, and I waited till the end of the year, went in, grabbed the chips, went back and looked at him, and I was like, I got you, buddy. I found where he was bedding, man. He was daylight every day through this draw. I had a hunch he was, and then the camera confirmed it. So we did everything going into that next year to revolve around Bucktober. And the reason he had his name, he wouldn't show up to the farm till October, so I didn't know if he was going to be there the next year or not.
Yeah.
And he was. We had a blind. We put there really wasn't a good tree position to be in, so we were out on this grassy knoll overlooking this draw where I had all these, daylight photos the year before, and it leaned a little bit, and I put on one of these high-rise hunters I bought from down in Mississippi at a show, and I'll be doggone, one of the outriggers popped a bolt, and I don't know if you ever saw that episode, but Wade and I fell down in that blind. It tumbled over with us in it, and didn't feel very good, but we ended up putting the blind back up, and about a week later I just kept hunting him on every south wind because the access was pretty locked, and we had a lot of souths coming, so I just kept hunting him in there and every day, and then finally Wader and I killed him one really pretty frosty morning. But that buck without question was one that it was really a good story that led to actually putting an arrow in that deer. And on top of that, I had a really bad shoulder that year. That was the first year I was diagnosed with an inflamed biceps tendon. So I was only pulling like 46, 47 pounds that fall. I could not pull that bow back. And I killed that deer, the biggest deer I've ever killed, rack-wise and body-wise, with a 46 or 47-pound bow. It went through the onside, barely poked out the offside, and he ran, 80, 90 yards, and he was dead.
Jeez.
So you don't have to pull a lot of weight to kill a whitetail.
No, that's for sure. And you guys over the years, you've kind of transitioned into using more box blinds, right, than sitting in tree stands, or are you guys still 50-50, or what's your ratio there, do you think?
Oh, I would say it's probably 90% box blinds
Yeah.
anymore. I mean, we love the ability to, especially here in our country, we have a lot of rolling open tops, wooded draws, and if you're down in that draw, I can't tell you how many times I've been on the side of a draw, and the bucks are always out there on the hump, out in the open. So we were like, we've got to get out there. There's no trees out there. And our country here in North Missouri, Southern Iowa, most of it's like that. It's rolling open hills, pastures, wooded draws. So we put a lot of box blinds in through the years. And then, it allows you to get exactly where you want to and then plant how you want to with the access that you need. It's kind of like taking a blank chalkboard and going, I want to sit here. Here's my access, and just making it all perfect.
Yeah.
And, they are incredibly lethal. I will tell you that. We get some pushback because we do so much blind hunting. But personally, for me, it was an evolution to get in them and really, really cover your scent well with ozone, keeping clean. It takes that scent profile down a next level. And man, have we been successful out of those box blinds. I mean, they are absolute death as far as I'm concerned.
For sure. So success-wise, this season, you and I talked about it a little bit, but how have you guys been doing? How have your properties been this year from a successful standpoint?
Been pretty good. We're in the third year of drought in a row, and here we are, 24, 23, 22, historically dry. We had EHD. I bet we lost 20-30% of our herd in 22. We lost another 30-40% in 23, and we're losing them again this year. So we have really, really been set back in terms of overall numbers. So we've been very selective on the bucks that we'll take. We're trying to shoot stuff at least 5 years old, and in many cases they're 6 or older.
Yeah.
Years ago I went away from having one main big block farm because I lost so many deer to EHD in 1998 when I first bought my first farm. And after that, I gradually evolved into more of a satellite farm type of deal where I've got 80 here, 40 there, 160 there, as opposed to one big farm. So with EHD, it's often pockety. So we've got certain areas that are quite good. We've got other farms that are absolutely wiped out. So we've been able to utilize that strategy with the satellite farms and actually still have success by planting a lot of food, taking care of the cover, taking care of the water, and being smart about when we go in there. And overall, we've done quite well.
Yeah.
I mean, Missouri was fantastic for us. Iowa's been fantastic. We've killed some big deer. We've killed a lot of mature deer. And we're starting to take a few does as well to try and balance things out. But overall, harvesting nearly as many does as we have in the past because Mother Nature did that for us through EHD.
So gun season, a couple weeks ago, like 3 weeks ago, opening day for Missouri. How'd you guys do?
My mom was in, and she missed a really big 8 the first night of the season. And then a couple days later, she's 91, by the way. She killed the biggest deer of her life with Terry with a crossbow. He went like 157 back in October. And then she came to my farm for rifle, and she missed about 150-inch 8. And then a couple days later, she killed about 130-inch 10-point,
nice.
4.5 or
Yeah.
3.5. So that was the joy for me. And, of course, Taylor and Mabel were in as well. Taylor took a few days off while I was filming Mom, and then she jumped back in there. And then a couple days later, Taylor killed a 155-inch 9. So,
awesome.
Perry killed a nice deer, mid-40s. Wade ended up killing the 8 that Mom missed, and it went 149 and a few eighths. And then Coon Dog was up. What'd your deer score, Dog? 153. So we killed some bucks there in Missouri.
So in Missouri, what's your go-to caliber bullet combination? So what's your go-to?
It depends who's shooting. For Mom, it's a 223 with a 64 grain bullet. Taylor likes the 270. Myself, Wade, and Perry, and Dog, we like the 6.8 Western.
Oh, yeah.
So all over the board. I like the 270 as well. But, 243, I think the boys killed one with a 243 as well. I mean, that's a hard round to, argue with.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You hear so many different debates about which caliber is good for whitetails. I really think it comes down to which one do you shoot accurately, which one do you have the most confidence in. Because we had killing shots with all of those calibers. Mom's deer dropped in the field, They shot a deer with a 243 that went 15, 20 yards down in the field. The 6.8 Western, just absolutely devastation.
Yeah.
I just killed my deer with it and just smokes them, man. I mean, I love shooting deer with a gun because it's amazing to me what they've done with the ammunition to make it so incredibly lethal on the other end. That deer season round is unbelievable.
Yeah. And the 6.8, I'm with you. That's probably my favorite caliber to use for whitetail. Like you said, I killed a buck in Kansas the first year that 6.8 was kind of introduced. Just devastation. And it's there's something about that confidence that I have when that 6.8's in my hand for deer season. You just know that it's stacked in your favor for sure.
It is. A lot of the deer that we shoot with the 6.8 run less than 10, 15 yards and they just fall over. It's just a vicious round, and we shoot a suppressor on it, and it doesn't really have recoil to it. I mean, we love that round.
Yeah, I mean, Winchester, obviously, you guys have been partners with Winchester for a long time, and the innovation they continue to kind of put into the ammunition and the technology, and it kind of blows me away a little bit. And we're a little privy, both of us, with knowing what's coming out, because you guys are field testing stuff, a year ahead sometimes than the general public's going to see it. What's the one thing that you look at, or maybe it's a couple things that just kind of reinforces that the Winchester way of innovation? It to me it constantly amazes me at the people behind the scenes that push that limit.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's the people at Winchester. That's the thing that impresses me year in and year out. They're coming up with, products that when I think Winchester, I always think perfection. Like, they will not release it until every single thing about that round is perfect. And they do their due diligence. There's a wide team at Winchester that does all of this testing and developing. Their engineers are second to none. Their marketing team's second to none. And everything is just perfect. They don't make any mistakes, right? Do you ever notice that? Like
100%.
Winchester never make a mistake. And when that round hits the shelf for the hunter to go out and use it, you can bet that it is perfected in that box. Like, you're not going to find a better round than the one you're about to put in the gun. Like, everything they do is just grade A stuff. And it goes back to the people. They are just so good to work with and so intelligent and so passionate about ammunition, conservation, and hunting.
Yeah. I sat down with Jason Gilbertson here a couple days ago on the set. We just talked for an hour about, just in general, the Winchester way. And that is the way. It's innovation, but it's treating people right. They have people working, in the Winchester facilities that have been there 20, 30, 40, some of them 50 years that have been there. But they treat people right. And when you are a part of the Winchester family, you don't leave it. You don't leave it. And they don't want you to leave. And that's the great part about it, is if they reach out and say, hey, we want you guys to be a part of what we're doing, there's a reason for it. They've done their due diligence on you. And it's almost, they look at the relationship opportunity and the quality of people just as much as what you can do in front of the camera, or what you can talk about in front of the camera, what you can write. That's the one thing that I've always been impressed with. And, we're going on 15 years of our relationship with Winchester. And, it really is, you hear nothing but good things about that company and about the people.
Yeah, the only thing you hear bad is, I can't get that round, or they don't have it on the shelf. Demand is so high. Like, that's the one negative you ever hear about Winchester, and really they've caught up with a lot of that backlog demand. COVID, I think, brought some of that on, but a lot of those shelves are now stocked again. But really, that's about the only negative you could think of. But all the ammunition companies were in the exact same shape at that time.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Everything else, just perfection in a box, man. Every round is just unreal how good it is.
Yeah, right out of the box. And I asked Gilbertson about that. I said, okay, so we put out a great story, or you guys have a great article or whatever. The first thing some of the guys and folks are where's the 17 rounds or where's 22 long rifle? It's like, I said, tell me about that. Like, what's it like to try and keep up with demand, especially over, like the COVID, when people are just buying so much. And Jason said, we literally, we can't make it any faster. and he said, sometimes you don't know what's going to go off the shelves, and we can kind of predict that stuff. But that's, like you said, that's the only negative. And that's, like you said, a negative for all ammunition manufacturers is sometimes you just can't get it all on the shelves, man, for one reason or another.
That's a good thing. The shooting sports are healthy, man. People love their guns, they love their ammunition, and they're buying it.
Oh,
gotta love it.
Yeah, it's great. So real quick, your turkey setup. So what gauge, choke, what do you like to run during turkey season?
I'm a 20 gauge man. I love 20 gauge, and I have been I like a lighter gun, and long beard XR gun's good to 40, 45. It just, that's me. I shoot a 555 constriction choke. I shoot an optic. We get a lot of pushback about our optics, but if you go to the range and you're shooting those Longbeard XR at 10 yards or 15 yards, you're talking about, a golf ball to tennis ball size.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we're dead on. I want to be accurate. So I've been shooting an optic. My goodness, since back in the early 90s, I've shot an optic on a shotgun, and it has served us well. So
yeah.
Predominantly a still target, so why not be as accurate as you can?
100%. So I get this question a lot, and I answer it, a lot of times the same way, but I know you get it as well. You've got a great team of producers that work to try and create the very best content for you guys. When somebody asks you, especially nowadays, what can I do to either be a part of Drury or to have the outdoors and outdoor media, how can I want that to be part of my life? What do you tell them? What's the route you tell them?
Well, the best route is to just go start doing it and prove that you can. When it comes to, that's generally the conversation I have. We're wide open to talk to anybody that wants to be a part of the Drury Outdoors family, but there's a few boxes you got to check first. You got to be able to do it. You got to have a very clean background. We have a zero tolerance policy at Drury Outdoors in terms of any type of game violation or really anything at all. So you have zero tolerance from that standpoint. So we do pretty thorough due diligence and background checks on everybody, but they virtually have to produce their way onto the team, if you will.
Yeah.
Show us you can do it. And there's enough educational stuff out there right now that you could get a point of view camera or two, a GoPro Hero, and then a point and shoot, camcorder with 4K, and you can produce some pretty awfully good stuff.
Absolutely.
And if you know how to put it together, absolutely, we'll take a look at you and make you part of the family if we think you can be productive over the long haul.
Oh, absolutely. So, wrapping things up a little bit here, what do you personally attribute your success to as a team, as individually? Is it hard work? Is it luck? Is it knowledge? Is it the team around you? Is it a little bit of all that? Because there's a lot of things when you talk about your story and you listen to your story, a lot of those kind of all ring true to success. But if you were to point back at one of those factors, what would it be more than the other?
I can definitely name what I think differentiates our style of content and why we've been able to have a lane to go down for 35 years. This is our 35th anniversary. And back in the day, Terry and I both said we're going to make it about the animal and not ourselves. And we say it all the time, day in and day out, in the studio, to our subcontractors, to our sponsors. We make it about them, not us. We make it about the game, and we make it about the viewer, those two things. We want their experience to be educational, informative, enjoyable, and above and beyond all things, we want respect for the game at the end of the day. So we make it about them, not us. And that is our brand. It's who we are, and it has served us well for 35 years.
Amen. If you could explain, for you guys, what it means to be part of the Winchester family, how would you explain that?
They say it's the American legend, and here's a brand that's so iconic, and it's my heart swells with pride when I think about that W and think about being part of that team with the quality that goes into it, the history of that brand. I just can't tell you how proud and humbled we are to serve every single day and put the Winchester mark on our head or take it with us out there in the field. We know that it's quality, and we know that if someone actually watches one of our shows, purchases a Winchester product, whether it be the firearm or the ammunition, we know they're going to have a good experience when they go afield as well. So we are very, very proud of our association and relationship with Winchester.
Great. Yeah, agreed. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an honor to sit down and chat with you, and good luck here in the Iowa gun season here this weekend.
Absolutely, brother. I'm looking forward to it, and thank you for the conversation. It's always a pleasure, Jason.
Thanks. This portion of the Winchester Life podcast has been brought to you by Winchester Ammunition, a world leader in delivering innovative products. Winchester is the American legend, a brand built on integrity, hard work, and a deep focus on its loyal customers. Considered one of the world's leading ammunition manufacturers, Winchester has built its reputation on delivering innovative ammunition products, providing top-shelf customer service, and demonstrating industry leadership. To learn more, visit winchester.com. Winchester Optics. The Winchester Supreme line of optics offers rifle scopes, binoculars, spotting scopes, and rangefinders for all of your shooting and hunting needs. To learn more, visit worldofwinchester.com. Winchester Repeating Arms. The guns that work with a reputation built on reliability. Winchester rifles and shotguns are built tough, with superior fit and finish. Winchester firearms are built to exceed expectations. To learn more, visit winchesterrepeatingarms.com. This portion of the Winchester Life podcast is brought to you by Ducks Unlimited. Established in 1937 with the singular mission of conserving wetlands and grasslands for North America's waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited conserves, restores, and manages wetlands and associated habitats. 43 species of waterfowl call this continent home, requiring diverse and abundant wetlands for their populations to thrive. Ducks Unlimited and their partners have contributed to healthy duck populations in all 50 states through millions of acres of habitat restoration, enhancements, and protection. Visit their website at ducks.org to join and learn more. And now back to the show. So this week on our Ammo 101 segment, we have Ben Frank with Winchester here to talk about the latest and greatest from the world of Winchester ammunition. Ben, welcome to the show, and what the heck are we going to talk about today?
Well, thanks for having me, and let's talk about Longbeard TSS. We just introduced it this year at SHOT Show, and it's the latest, greatest, really the best turkey load that we've ever produced, and that's saying something because I know you guys and your team have used Longbeard for a long time. I have as well, and in terms of lead turkey loads, there's really nothing that compares to that, but whenever we added this TSS into the mix, it's the best ever.
So talk about the properties of TSS, and like you said, we helped you guys launch Longbeard XR back almost, it feels like 10 years ago, maybe a little more, which completely changed the game, and it kept the price point solid. But when TSS started making an impact here over the last couple of years, you guys went to work. What are the properties of a TSS in a turkey load, and what are the advantages?
Yeah, so it's really about density. So when you're talking about lead turkey loads, really the main ones are your 4s, 5s, and 6s. I'd say number 5 lead is probably the most popular. That's the one we sell the most of. But when you start talking about being able to use TSS, you're talking about shot sizes of 7, 8s, and a lot of times 9s, and you're really just throwing a ton more pellets out there. So you're talking about patterns with, instead of 300 pellets of lead in there, with 600 pellets of TSS.
Wow.
With the same or more energy downrange. So especially on turkeys, where you're talking about a lot of times they're standing still and you're trying to put a ton of pellets in a small target. TSS is the way to go. And, TSS has been around a while. It's not like this is the first time TSS. There's a lot of products out there, a lot of companies that load TSS. But what we wanted to do with Longbeard was really elevate that Longbeard brand. So not only just take TSS and throw it in here, how could we be the best TSS load out there available? And the way we did that is really just by making them about the heaviest that you can get. So I think our 12 gauge is 2 3/8 ounce. So you're talking about, let me look here, I wrote it down, 830 pellets of TSS. 830, which is crazy, So, I mean, that's just, when you look at the patterns of these things, particularly in a 10 to 20 inch circle, it's almost ridiculous how many pellets there are, but it's amazing, because that's what you want when you're going turkey hunting. There's a lot of things that go into it. It might be travel. It might be, just finding a place to hunt, and then finally finding that bird. The last thing you want to do is miss, right? You want this thing. If he hangs up at 50, 60 yards, you want to be like, hey, is my ammo? You don't want to be sitting there thinking, is my ammo capable of taking this bird? And so it's like, and we don't build these products to try to say, hey, go out and shoot them farther. I mean, You're probably like me. I'd love them to just be right in my lap. That's turkey hunting to me. Yep. But from time to time, when you work your butt off and you're, running through fields, running up and down hills, and if all the closer you can get, sometimes you want to be able to have just a little bit of extra range to it. TSS is the way to go.
It is. And we hosted this last spring, before it was officially launched, we had it at our turkey camp. We did a Winchester turkey camp here in Michigan, and we pattern board tested it out to, we went 20 yards, I think 45 yards, and 60 yards. And I was shocked. Of course, the 60 yards was impressive. I can't remember the pellet count we had, in the kill zone of the turkey, but it was so many. I don't even think we could count them all. But to see what that pattern looked like at 40 yards, you could put your fist through the hole. It was unbelievable. So, for us to, and like you said, I think the advantage is the pellet count, but it's also being able to shoot the sub gauges, right?
Yeah, the sub gauge piece is really taken off, and now you got people out there shooting 410s at turkeys, and historically people would look at you like you were crazy doing something like that because maybe you don't have enough pellets. But the 410 TSS loads have as many pellets, believe it or not. A number 9 410 has as many pellets, really actually a few more pellets, than a 12 gauge 3-inch number 5 lead. So yeah, you have the same amount of energy in those pellets. So you can now take people out in the woods, whether it's just somebody who doesn't want to deal with recoil or getting kids involved. I remember the story when I took my son turkey hunting for the first time, and I hadn't let him shoot the 12 gauge just because I knew it might make him a little bit gun shy, right? Yeah. But we were out there and he wanted to take a shot. There wasn't any turkeys out there, but a crow kind of walked by. So he's like, hey, you think I could shoot at this crow? I'm like, okay, we'll see how this goes. So I'm ready for it, right? Yeah. Well, when he shoots it, he was not expecting that, right? And he said he wanted to keep hunting, and he was fine, but it definitely jarred him, and I know that he for sure wasn't expecting what that was going to be like.
Yes.
And I wished back then I would have had a 410 to give him, because there would have been none of that, right?
100%.
And so we use 20. He's 20 gauge now, even though he's a little bit older now, but he much prefers, just like myself, to shoot 20 gauge. And when you throw TSS in there on 20 gauge, it's awesome stuff, man.
Oh yeah, and just the sub gauges, maneuverability in the timber. Sometimes if on a spot and stalk, or just maneuvering that gun where you need to put it, where those birds that are coming up behind you have to make a swing to the right. For a grown adult, it might not be a big deal, but for a kid, or somebody, a smaller frame person, yeah, I mean, they might not be able to swing that to the right and hold it steady. So the sub gauges, for a million reasons, are a kind of a trend, but I think it's a great trend, and TSS makes that, so much more attainable now, I think, in realistic. So talk about the how many shells come in a box. What's the breakdown there, and what's the cost difference? Do you know the cost difference specifically?
It's definitely more expensive. I mean, it just depends on the retailer,
Sure.
right? And so typically on Longbeard, you're talking 10 round boxes, but on TSS, a lot of times they're 5, just because it's an expensive ring, right?
Yeah.
It definitely, sometimes it could be, $6 to $8 per shot, so,
Yep.
But again, you start thinking about it, it's like all the things that go into turkey hunting and all of those aspects that you want to make sure are right.
Yep.
And sometimes it's difficult to get those birds to do what you want them to do. Right. And
Exactly.
so you want to leave nothing up to chance. Another piece of the puzzle, granted, it definitely adds to the cost, but when it comes to shooting, it's always good to practice. Right. And again, when you go back to the kids or the smaller frame shooters, it's not a whole lot of fun to pattern your gun on turkey hunting. I mean, I remember whenever we used to do that at the beginning of every season, and I'm thinking, man, I'm not looking forward to this day,
it
right?
rocks you
Now.
Yeah, it rocks you. If you don't have a target, a turkey to shoot at, you feel that recoil, especially with the turkey loads.
Yeah, no adrenaline going. You're just sitting there trying to shoot paper and make sure that everything's good. And yeah, okay, maybe you shoot a couple shots and that costs you a little bit. But again, I think that practice is going to help you in the field as well. But practicing doesn't feel like it used to, right? It feels more enjoyable, more fun. I shoot it, I go down and check out the paper and look at the amazing number of pellets, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm ready. And that confidence can help you in the field as well, right? When you're shooting something and you're sitting there worried about recoil, you're not 100% confident in the pattern. I mean, it definitely weighs on you whenever something comes out there. Whenever you're shooting TSS, I mean, anybody that shot it and they put it on paper is just like, okay, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and it's important to, if you have a choke, to at least pattern it with your choke so you understand honestly what the short range shots look like, because it is tight. So a 20-yard shot,
yep.
you have to put it where you want it. You don't have much wiggle room there. So patterning your gun with the appropriate chokes, or the chokes you have with your shotguns, is definitely a necessity.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible when you're shooting patterns. Like you said, you guys were seeing patterns at 40 yards. You almost have to be out past 60 or beyond to even really get patterns that even look similar to lead loads of the past.
Exactly. Because
there's just that many pellets in there, and the energy's there. Again, not suggesting that you need to go out and shoot turkeys at 75, 80 yards. Not any of that. But it's just having that capability, whereas before 40 yards might have been kind of on the edge for you. Right. Now 40 yards is a chip shot, and I wouldn't think anyone would think 40 yards is out of the realm for turkey hunting.
Exactly. Longbeard TSS just released. Thanks for the behind the scenes and all the information about what makes this shot shell superior, really, and hopefully throw it in your turkey vest this spring and see how it works for you. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Thanks.
The Winchester Life Podcast is brought to you by Winchester Ammunition, Winchester Repeating Arms, Winchester Safes, White Flyer Targets, Folds of Honor, Birchwood Casey, Walkers, Winchester Pet, and Winchester Optics. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this week's show. Please make sure you click the follow button on your podcast apps so you never miss a new episode. This episode was produced by Aaron Cox and Jason Gilbertson, engineered by Jason Freer, directed by Chad Andrus, written and edited by Jason Brown, with behind-the-scenes photography by Kelsey Myers. I'm Jason Brown, and you've been listening to the Winchester Life Podcast. See you next time.